In this video, we're going to discuss 5 very powerful money lessons that I learned from my parents growing up that have stuck with me my entire life. You might even recognize 1 or 2 of these yourself. There's something about having only 3 channels on the television and 1 shared family phone that tends to shape how you look at the world when you're growing up. If you're like most people watching this channel, you grew up with a financial model that was vastly different than the model that our kids have. That model was your parents. During the time you grew up, there was no Uber, there was no online shopping, and the mall was this magical place where you would go to be seen and to see other people wearing your favorite pair of 501 jeans and your Ralph Lauren polo shirt, because that was the uniform for mall walking, at least during the mid-'80s. Our parents were part of what was called the silent generation, at least that's what we call them today, and they valued stability. This is in large part because of the lessons that they learned from their parents who grew up during the Great Depression. Stability dictated what they did and how they did them, including how they managed their money. Ahead, I'm going to remind you of things that you might have forgotten, and a few of you may still know, and these things are the wonderful money lessons from Mom and Dad. And by the way, if you're new here, hello, my name is Jeff. I'm a CPA turned public speaker and author. I spent 25 years in the financial services industry here in New York, and I started this channel in 2020 to help retirees with their finances and other retirement-related ideas. I've created over 300 videos on this channel to help you with retirement, lifestyle, finances, tools, to help you create the retirement that you can truly love. In those 300 videos, we talk a lot about the most relevant financial information of the day. Today, we're going to go back in time a bit. Just a note about some of the financial information of the day. Most of it I agree with, but some of it I disagree with because, frankly, it's like a stopped clock. A stopped clock is right twice a day, and so is some of the financial information you get out there. There's a lot of bad financial information out there that creeps into our lives. Some of it is just mania, some of it is intentional. But, for example, you might remember tulip mania from 1636. In 1636, it would cost the price of a house to buy a tulip bulb. Then there was the South Sea financial bubble of 1720. This is where Isaac Newton lost his entire fortune. The Roaring Twenties saw the stock market surge only to come crashing down again, and the only ones that were in the know were the stock pool operators that were operating behind the scenes. More recently, the dot-com bubble created millionaires overnight, but it also ruined a lot of people who bought their stock on margin. The point is, the lessons we learned from our parents were based on experiences that they had at a particular point in time, and frankly, it is a time long past, but the lessons are still valid today. The first lesson is the value of frugality. We live in a disposable asset world. Your smartphone that you buy today will be replaced, or at least the newer model will be available within 12 months. The car that you buy today has a predetermined lifespan, and it's very hard to keep it going beyond that lifespan, at least the way that some of these cars are designed. And a computer that you buy today will be totally antiquated in 5 years. It didn't used to be that way. In fact, our parents took care of their own home repairs, their own car repairs often, and their own furniture repairs. I remember my mom stripping furniture and resurfacing it and getting it ready for the family again. I had an incredible experience a while back. For those of you that don't know my background, I grew up in California. In fact, I am a kid from Oakland, California. At the time I went to Oakland High School, it wasn't the best high school. It was actually quite dangerous. The way we ended up there, by the way, is that my dad was in the military and we moved around every 4 years, and we moved to California, and year 1 of a 4-year stint, they decided the place to become frugal and make a lot of money is Oakland, California. And so they bought a house that needed a little bit of work in an area that was up and coming. I still remember when they bought it, it was just over $70,000. This is in the 80s. And they sold it 3 years later for almost $150,000. And the entire time that they owned the house, they were repairing the house. The home was filled with the scent of paint remover for almost the entire 3 years that I was there. My mom spent the entire time stripping off the old paint and restoring the house back to its 1920s glory. But this is the really special thing I alluded to earlier. When my older daughter turned 21, actually a year or 2 later, we decided to take a trip back to California, out to Napa Valley, to take a tour of the wineries out there. In our way out of town, we decided to take a tour of my old neighborhood, and we got out and we walked the neighborhood. We caught up with an old friend. I wanted to introduce her to him. He and I were karate instructors together in the 80s at a karate school, and he and I remained friends from that point forward. After we spent time with my friend Gary, we then decided to go to the house. I was really excited to show her where I grew up when I was just a kid. Admittedly, it looked a lot different on the outside. In fact, the garage in the back had been totally removed and it had been turned into a larger backyard. But here's the special part. Outside of the home was the new owner, a very nice woman, and she was working in the garden on the side of the house. I walked over and said hello, introduced myself, and told her that I used to live in the house. Now, a strange man walking up to you in Oakland, California, even in broad daylight, raises an antenna, so she was a bit cautious in the initial part of our discussion. We talked for a few minutes, and she got more and more comfortable with the discussion because I talked about things that were on the inside of the house that only someone living there would know about, and then her eyes opened wide, and she said, "Hold on a second." And then about 2 minutes later, she came back out and she had a picture that was in a box in a crawl space. And it was a picture of me. This is what it looks like. She looked at the picture, she looked at me, she looked at the picture, and then she immediately started smiling and invited us into the house. Now here's where it gets interesting and why this really matters. She took me into the dining room, and the dining room had not changed. In fact, she commented that the hardwood in the dining room was so special because all of the other houses that were built in a similar fashion had been gutted and their interior had been replaced with new material that was very strong but not very elegant. This is me in the dining room recording a video for my parents so that they could see that what they did back then was still here today. Even back then, the cost to refurb all of that woodwork would have been prohibitive. But if you do it yourself, if you're frugal, you can create a lot of value in a home that doubles in value in 3 years. By the way, 2025 is just around the corner. And if one of your New Year's resolutions is to get your personal finances under control and you don't want to pay 1% to a financial planner, or you just are getting tired of keeping everything on a spreadsheet, or worse yet, doing it manually, you should definitely check out the personal financial planning software that I use, Bolden, who's very kindly sponsoring this video. Bolden allows you to explore different what-if scenarios. It tells you your probability of success under various contribution levels and market conditions, incorporates Social Security into your financial plan, and much more. I've used personal financial planning software since January of 2010 to manage my finances. I checked out Bolden earlier this year, and I was so impressed with the company that I called them and asked if I could be an affiliate of theirs. If you'd like to get your personal finances in shape for 2025, and you'd like to try Bolden free for 2 weeks, simply go to go.bolden.com/Schmidt. That's go.bolden, BOLDEN.com/SCHMIDT. After the 2-week trial, it's only $120 a year if you decide to stay on, and I think most of you will. To make things easy for you, I put a link in the description below. Lesson number 2, life is long, and building financial safety in your future is a marathon, not a sprint. Many of our parents grew up hearing stories from their parents about how horrible the Great Depression was. And frankly, the Great Depression was the foundation for many of the social safety nets that we have today, including Social Security. But at the time that our parents were growing up, there was no real major financial education, at least not like there is today. And the way that they learned was from other people. They had conversations and they read the newspaper. They'd listen to the radio for programming, but there wasn't a lot of financial education on the radio, at least in the 1940s, 50s, and maybe even early 60s. They aspired to work for a company that had a pension. In fact, in the mid-50s, about 25% of the companies had pension programs in place, corporate pension programs. By the time the 60s arrived, it was more like 40 to 50%. This helped them avoid the get-rich-quick schemes that we see today, all over the place, frankly. And importantly, they put their money in stable places like the bank. They would put their money in savings accounts, they'd buy savings bonds, maybe real estate, maybe their own small business. 20% went into small business. All right, on to number 3. Our parents had a massive radar for financial risk. One of the biggest challenges that our current generation faces is a lack of understanding of financial risk, or at least a way to measure it accurately. In fact, I would say this is a blind spot compared to previous generations. They know, for example, that a startup is riskier than an established company, But do they know viscerally that their chances of being part of a startup and receiving equity, and that equity taking off, is less than 1 in 100, and that 65% of all new businesses fail within the first 10 years? This is because they haven't been around catastrophic financial loss, but our parents have. They saw firsthand, at least heard firsthand from their parents, the horror stories of growing up in the 1930s. During the Great Depression, people lost everything, and frankly, some of them were heavily in debt because of the bets that they made during the Roaring '20s in the stock market. So they moved in together, generations of people moved in together, and that left a lasting mark on those individuals. Of course, the Great Depression was caused by the stock market crash of 1929, and frankly, that was caused by the market manipulation that was going on in the background by the stock pool operators, many of which wrote the Securities Act of 1933 and 1934 to protect people from the very things that they were doing. This doesn't save people from bad investments, but it does create a framework so that people are presented with information in a more consistent manner. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't bad investments out there that are outside of the securities markets. And this is where that radar comes in handy. Now, when I was a kid, there was a property guru. His name was Tom Vu, and he had a late-night TV show that sold a course. It was about $200 on how to get rich in real estate with no money down. I went to my dad and I said, "Can I borrow $200? I will promise you I will pay you back, and I will in fact pay you back double or even triple with the profits that I make from all of the no money down opportunities that I'm going to buy into." And my dad very wisely said, "No, you don't really want to do that. It's a scam, and it's really something that you should avoid at all costs. Trust me, I have a radar for these sorts of things." And for those of you who don't remember Tom Vu, he was famous for being a Vietnamese immigrant who went from rags to riches, or at least allegedly rags to riches. He had a 90-minute course that you could purchase, and that course was designed to help you help yourself go out and buy real estate and make millions of dollars, just like Tom Vu. Vu also had a super course that was $16,000 for those that were a graduate of the tape series. After a giant lawsuit, Tom Vu got out of the property education game and became a professional poker player, which seems about right. And by the way, I did find the money to buy the course. I worked very hard for half a summer. I came up with the $200. I didn't ask my dad. The course came about a month later because back then you had to send in a check and the paperwork, and then you'd get back the course in the mail. It came in a cracked plastic box with 6 tapes. I listened to one tape, and it was entirely about why I needed to get down to Florida for the $16,000 seminar. To this day, I am super happy that my dad didn't lend that 18-year-old kid $200. He's long forgotten about it. In fact, if I brought it up with him today, he probably wouldn't even remember what I was talking about it. But I learned a big lesson there. All right, on to number 4, the importance of dedication to a single career. Today's retirees watch their parents work very hard at one career, and they watch them grow in that career, and the value of perseverance and how they could actually do better year after year after year. I remember my dad went from an ensign to a commander in the Coast Guard, and I watched, it seemed like every few years he was getting promoted. And it's fair to say that these people were what they did. I'm an electrician. I'm a doctor. I'm a plumber. I'm an architect. I'm a military officer. You get the point. Some could say that this is a dangerous and even naive trait, and there's probably some truth to that today. But if you can find a career where there is stability, even if the stability is just in your ability to navigate that career, that field that you're an expert in, no matter where you're working, that does have the ability to help you build bigger nest eggs and a bigger future. All right, on to number 5, the benefits of home ownership. For many retirees, their parents modeled the long-term financial benefits of owning a home and building equity in that home. Whether you rent or own in retirement depends on a lot of factors, but there's no doubt that owning a home as you're progressing through your adult life tends to produce a better financial outcome than not owning a home, all things being equal. On average, people just have a higher net worth because it's a forced savings account. Now, the reason I say on average is because there are people out there, I suppose, who've done the analysis, the rent versus own analysis, their entire adult life, and they've said, you know what, Given this assumption, I'm going to rent and take everything that I have in excess of rent and put it into an S&P 500 index or wherever they decide to put it. But that is a very rare person. And to be super clear, their net worth is based on their investment habits, not lack of home ownership. This person is often very analytical, and they have a view that the housing market isn't going to go up nearly as fast as the stock market, and so they don't want to put capital into the housing market. That would have looked like a very wise decision in Q1 2007, where the average home price was just over $257,000, and a very bad decision in Q1 2009, where the average home price was just over $208,000. And just to complete the thought here, that individual in Q1 2007 who decided not to buy a home, if they had stayed out of the home market today, that home would have been worth just over $420,000, up 63% from Q1 2007. The rent versus own argument only works if the renter takes their excess and invests it or saves it, but we've also been told, at least we have been told growing up, it's changing now, but at the time, 10% of your income should be put into investments. Is it still 10% if you don't own a home? I think the number might have to be higher in that case, don't you? The point is, our parents' generation worked very hard to come up with a down payment for their first home, and after they put the money down, everything from that point forward was a bit more on autopilot, and it was easier to build wealth because you were doing it one mortgage payment at a time. If you like this video, check out our previous video, Sell These 5 Things Before You Go Into Retirement. Also, if you know someone who can benefit from this video, please forward it to them using the share button below. It's that thing that looks like a little arrow, hooky arrow type of thing right down below. You just hit that button and you can send it to them by text, by email. I think you can even do it by social media. And while you're in a clicking mood, the like button is right there, just to the left of the share button. Just saying. This is Jeff Schmidt. I will see you in that video right there.